Oshodi under the bridge was loud that morning, but right in the middle of all that, a crowd went completely silent. Every eye was fixed on a wooden chessboard sitting on a rough bench. A homeless man with an overgrown beard and a tattered brown coat leaned forward and moved his piece with calm hands. His name was Jonathan. Across from him sat Williams, the famous billionaire CEO of LamsTech, dressed in an expensive navy blue suit. His black Bentley was parked a few steps away, shining like a mirror in the sun. Jonathan touched his king, then paused. He looked up at Williams and gave the tiniest smile. His eyes were tired but sharp. "Checkmate," he said. For one long second, nobody breathed. Then the street exploded. "He won," someone shouted. "The homeless man beat the billionaire," another voice cried. "Ah, Oshodi has seen drama today," a woman yelled, clapping her hands over her mouth. Williams stared at the board like it had turned into a snake. His mouth opened and closed. He looked at his king, trapped. He looked at his rook, blocked. He looked at his queen, too far away to help. He had lost. But this wasn't where the story began. That morning, Lagos felt brighter, as if the sun had polished the sky. Williams had left his mansion early, hoping to quiet the noise inside his head. Board meetings, investor calls, staff decisions, everything had been heavy for weeks. When life grew too loud, he did the one thing that always gave him peace. He played chess. He loved the game. He loved the lines, the plans, the way a single move could change the whole story. And sometimes, when his heart needed it, he drove to the places people tried to forget. He brought food, talked to strangers, and set his board on a bench to play anyone brave enough to try. Today, he parked his black Bentley under the bridge at Oshodi. People turned to look. Some waved, some whispered. A group of boys ran close, wanting to see the fancy car. Williams stepped out, holding his wooden chessboard like a treasure chest. He searched for an opponent and saw him, a lean, dusty man sitting alone, his coat stained, his hair wild like a small storm. Jonathan didn't beg. He didn't even lift his head when the Bentley door shut with a soft thump. He just stared at nothing, like he was thinking about a world far away. Williams walked over. "Good morning," he said. "Do you play chess?" Jonathan lifted his eyes. They were gentle and smart. "Sometimes," he said. "Let's make it interesting," Williams replied, the playful smile already forming. He had said it many times to many people. "If you win, take my company." The street went still. A hawker holding bottles of cold water stopped mid-shout. Two market women raised their eyebrows at each other and laughed, thinking it was a joke. Jonathan's mouth tugged into a small smile. "If you lose," he said quietly, "will you stand by your word?" Williams chuckled. "Yes, of course, unless you are afraid of defeat," he teased, setting the chessboard down between them. "Because I know I will win." Jonathan looked around and lifted his voice. "Please," he called to the people nearby, "bear witness, let the whole street see how this ends." And they came. Men and women, traders and drivers, a few children with dusty feet. They formed a circle around the bench, eyes big, mouths open, ready to tell this story to anyone who would listen later. William sat. Jonathan sat. They shook hands. The game began. From the first move, the board felt different. Williams liked to attack. He loved bright lines and fast victories that made people clap. He moved his king's pawn forward. He brought his bishop out early, aiming at weak spots. He planned a trap, a net, a proud victory he had won 100 times before. Jonathan did not fight the way most people did. He moved like water sliding around a stone. His knight stepped back when it needed to. His pawns met the attack and then quietly shifted, closing doors without noise. When Williams struck on the left, Jonathan breathed to the right. When Williams tried to choke the center, Jonathan opened a small window and slipped through. "Who is this man?" one of the market women whispered. "He's just a homeless guy," a boy said, but his voice shook a little. Williams leaned in. He could feel that he was playing someone dangerous, someone who saw the game in layers. He changed plans. He tried to be patient. He tried to be wild. He tried to be both. But each time the board answered with the soft sound of Jonathan's piece landing in the exact place it needed to be. Jonathan never raised his voice. He never made a show. He just played with the quiet of a person who had spent a long time listening. To fights, to sirens, to his own heart. Suddenly, Williams realized his king had less room than he thought. A pawn he had ignored was now a fist at his door. A knight he thought was harmless was now a hook catching his sleeve. And that bishop, where did that bishop come from? Sat like a shadow, waiting for his final mistake. Williams swallowed. He glanced at the Bentley. The car had never looked so far away. He looked up at Jonathan. The man's eyes were kind. No pride, no mockery, only focus. "You can still resign," Jonathan said softly, like he was offering mercy. William's pride tightened. "Play," he said. So they played, and the circle of people leaned over the board as if pulled by a string. Even the traffic seemed to hold its breath. One more move, one more answer, one more small door closing. Then came the moment. Jonathan reached out and lifted his king, not to move it away, but to set a final perfect trap in front of Williams's face. The king touched down with a light wooden tap. "Checkmate," Jonathan said. For a heartbeat, Oshodi did not exist. No buses, no traders, no heat. Only the truth of the board. Then the shout. "He won. Homeless man has defeated him. God of Underbridge." Hands went to heads. A boy started dancing around the bench. A woman laughed and cried at the same time. Williams did not move. He felt a cold wave rise from his chest to his face. He had said the words. Everyone had heard them. He could not breathe in the old way anymore. Something in his life had shifted. Slowly he stood. His knees trembled. He reached out his hand. "Congratulations," he said, voice rough. "The new owner and CEO of LamsTech." The circle gasped again, this time with respect. Jonathan stood too. He took William's hand and shook it, gentle but firm. His smile was warm and sad, like a person who knew pain very well. Phones came out, pictures snapped, a conductor whistled, two men argued about whether this could be real. But there it was, the rich man and the homeless man, hands locked, a promise sitting between them like a signed paper. Williams pointed toward the Bentley. "Come with me," he said. "Get in." Jonathan turned to the crowd. "Thank you for bearing witness," he said. "Remember what you saw today." They walked to the car together. The driver, stunned, jumped around to open the back door. Williams gestured, and Jonathan slid into the leather seat. The smell of clean polish wrapped around him like a new coat. The door closed with a soft, rich sound. Williams got in beside him. The driver pulled out into the traffic, the city swallowing them whole. For a moment, neither man spoke. The chessboard rested on Jonathan's knees. Williams stared at the passing streets. His chest was tight, but not with anger anymore. With curiosity. With something like hope and fear mixed together. He turned to Jonathan. "Who are you?" he asked at last. Jonathan looked down at his hands. They were rough and scarred. He took a long breath and lifted his eyes. "My name is Jonathan," he said, "and before I fell, I was—" The Bentley's phone began to ring. The dashboard lit up with the word boardroom. Williams stared at the blinking screen. The ring kept going. The city hummed. Jonathan met his eyes, calm and steady. "Answer it," Jonathan said softly. "It's time to keep your word." The driver glanced in the mirror, waiting. Williams reached toward the call, and the screen flashed again. A second incoming number cutting across the first. Unknown caller. The car rolled deeper into Lagos traffic, trapped between two calls, two choices, and a promise that could change both their lives forever. The Bentley moved through the roaring Lagos traffic, its tinted windows shutting out the outside world. Inside, Williams sat still, his hand resting on the armrest, his mind spinning faster than any of the city's Danfo buses outside. A billionaire. A man who had won every game, until today. Across from him sat Jonathan, now quiet again, his rough fingers tracing the edges of the wooden chessboard that still sat between them. The faint smell of dust and city smoke clung to his coat, but there was something royal about the calm in his face, something that didn't match the worn fabric he wore. The phone on the dashboard stopped ringing. Silence filled the car. Williams broke it first. "Who are you, really?" Jonathan turned his head slowly, his tired eyes meeting William's steady gaze. "Just a man who made one too many wrong turns," he said softly. "But once upon a time, I was known for something else." Williams frowned. "Known for what?" Jonathan looked out the window as they drove past the bridge where he'd spent the last few years sleeping. His lips tightened. "For winning." They stopped first at a small barber shop on the edge of Surulere. The glass door rattled when Williams pushed it open. The barber, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a sharp blade, froze when he saw who it was. "Ah, Chief Williams. Good afternoon, sir," he said, jumping to his feet. You came here yourself?" Williams smiled faintly. "Yes, but today's visit isn't about me." He turned slightly. "He's the one who needs your service." The barber blinked, confused. He looked at Jonathan, at his tangled beard, the dirt on his face, the matted hair that looked like it hadn't met a comb in years. "Ah, yes, sir," the barber said softly. "Please, sit down." When the scissors began to cut, Jonathan closed his eyes. The sound was gentle, but each cut seemed to slice away a piece of his old life. The broken man under the bridge began to disappear. The barber trimmed the beard, shaped his hair, brushed his shoulders. When he was done, a stranger stared back from the mirror. A man clean, sharp, and alive. Williams smiled. "Now," he said, "you look like a CEO." Jonathan turned in the mirror, his throat tightening. For a moment, he saw not himself, but the man he used to be, before everything went wrong. Their next stop was a boutique in Victoria Island. Inside, cool air and the scent of expensive leather wrapped around them. The attendant's eyes widened when she saw Williams walk in, but even more when she noticed the man beside him. "I need a black suit," Williams said firmly. "Something fitting for a man who just won everything." The attendant nodded quickly and began showing options. Minutes later, Jonathan stepped out of the fitting room. The black suit hugged his shoulders perfectly. The white shirt beneath it glowed softly under the light. He looked different, like a man reborn. The store went quiet. Even Williams stared. The transformation was complete, but deep in Jonathan's eyes, a storm still lived. By the time they reached Williams' mansion in Banana Island, the sun was beginning to sink, casting gold over the white marble walls. Security men stood at attention as the Bentley rolled into the compound. When Jonathan stepped out, his feet sank slightly into the trimmed grass. He looked around slowly, at the fountains, the swimming pool that reflected the evening sky, the massive doors carved with the LamsTech crest. For years he'd walked past gates like these, hungry and invisible. Now one had opened for him. Williams led him into his private study. It smelled of books, whiskey, and wood polish. Framed certificates lined the walls, Harvard Business School, Forbes Awards, and photos of Williams shaking hands with presidents. "Sit," Williams said, lowering himself into a leather chair behind the desk. "We need to talk." Jonathan nodded and sat across from him, his hands clasped. Williams leaned forward. "You said you used to be known for winning. Tell me, who are you?" Jonathan looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "My name is Jonathan Adeyemi. Years ago, I was Nigeria's national chess champion. I represented the country in tournaments across the world, London, Sydney, New York." His voice trembled slightly, but he continued. "I was married then, to Amanda." He swallowed hard. "I loved her more than I loved the game." Williams listened, his face unreadable. "One day," Jonathan continued, "she asked me to invest some money into a new business her friend was starting. I agreed. I trusted her. But it wasn't a business. It was a trap. When the police stormed our home, they found drugs inside our safe. She had planted them there." The silence in the room thickened. "I was arrested. The news spread. My reputation gone in one night. My trophies were taken, my accounts frozen. She testified against me in court." Williams clenched his jaw. "I spent 5 years in prison," Jonathan said quietly. 5 years thinking of the woman who swore she loved me. When I got out, she had already married another man, a billionaire investor. My home was gone. My friends avoided me. My name was nothing but a headline in the past." He blinked, eyes wet. "So I stopped trying. I became the shadow you saw under the bridge." Williams leaned back, speechless. The story hit him harder than he expected. For years he'd played games to escape life's stress, never realizing that life itself could be the harshest game of all. Jonathan took a breath. When you came this morning, I thought it was a joke, but when you said, if you win, take my company, I heard something else. I heard God asking me, will you believe again? He smiled faintly through the tears. I played not to win your company, but to win my faith back. William's chest tightened. He felt something shift deep inside him. Respect, admiration, maybe even guilt. He had walked into Oshodi thinking he was the hero of the story, but it turned out he was just a chapter in someone else's redemption. After a long silence, William spoke. You could take everything now, Jonathan. I said the words in front of witnesses. The company, the assets, the shares, they're yours. Jonathan looked up sharply. No, he said, shaking his head. I won't take what isn't mine. I only want a second chance, a place to work, a chance to live with dignity again. The billionaire's eyes softened. He stood and walked around the desk. You didn't just win a game, he said. You reminded me why I started LamsTech. To build, to believe, to give people chances. He placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder. From today, you own 30% of LamsTech, not as a pity gift, but as a partner. Jonathan froze. 30%? His voice cracked. That's $800 million worth, Williams said simply. Jonathan's eyes filled again, and this time he couldn't hold back the tears. He stood and hugged Williams, his shoulders shaking. Thank you, he whispered, for seeing me. Williams patted his back. No, he said softly, thank you for reminding me that victory isn't just about winning, it's about healing. Outside, the night deepened. The sound of crickets filled the air, somewhere beyond the high walls. Lagos kept moving, fast, noisy, uncaring. But inside that mansion, two men sat in the stillness of something rare, redemption. Neither of them knew that the next morning, when Jonathan woke to begin his new life, a ghost from his past would already be standing at the mansion gate, waiting to walk back into his story. The morning sun poured over the white marble walls of Williams's mansion, bouncing light off the fountain and the rows of sleek black cars parked beside the driveway. Inside, the air smelled of fresh polish and quiet wealth. But at the front gate, a woman stood trembling, hair disheveled, clothes wrinkled, her eyes red as if she hadn't slept in days. Her name was Amanda. She was the same woman who had once worn diamonds, flown in private jets, and framed her husband for a crime he didn't commit. Now she clutched a small torn handbag, her lips quivering as she pleaded with the security man. Please, she said, her voice weak, tell Mr. Jonathan Adeyemi that Amanda is here to see him. The guard frowned. Madam, this is a private residence. You can't just— I'm his wife, she cried suddenly. Please, I beg you, just tell him I'm here. Her voice cracked, and something in it made the guard pause. He had heard many desperate voices at that gate, but this one sounded different, like a person whose pride had been broken into dust. He sighed. Wait here, he said finally. I'll tell him. Amanda nodded quickly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. As the guard walked toward the mansion, she turned and looked around. The fountain splashed softly. The walls were high and white. The world felt far away. She never imagined she would stand here like this, on the outside, begging for mercy. Inside, Jonathan was seated in the study, flipping through company files. His transformation had been fast, almost unreal. He now lived in a guest wing of William's mansion while they finalized his new position at LamsTech. Every morning, he still woke early, as if the cold concrete under Oshodi Bridge might return any second. He wore a simple grey suit, no tie, just a clean shirt and watch. But there was peace on his face, a kind of peace he hadn't known in years. Then a soft knock came at the door. Sir, the guard said from the doorway, there's someone asking to see you. Jonathan looked up. Who? The guard hesitated. She says her name is Amanda. The name hit him like a slap. For a moment, Jonathan couldn't breathe. His pen fell from his fingers and rolled across the desk. The room went quiet. Williams, who had been sitting nearby going through his laptop, looked up sharply. Amanda? He asked. Your wife? Jonathan swallowed. Ex-wife, he said quietly. At least that's what I thought. Williams studied his face. Do you want me to ask her to leave? Jonathan shook his head slowly. No, I need to see her. The guard led Amanda through the main hall. The marble floor echoed under her worn slippers. Her hands trembled as she clutched her bag close to her chest. When she entered the study, her eyes fell on the man behind the desk. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. He was clean, strong, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp and alive. Jonathan, she whispered. He didn't answer. He just stared at her, the silence stretched. Williams quietly stood and excused himself, leaving them alone. Amanda took a small step forward. I can't believe it's you. Her voice broke. I thought you were gone. You thought I'd die under the bridge, he said softly. His voice was calm, but every word cut like glass. Is that what you hoped for? Amanda's eyes filled with tears. No, I swear I didn't mean for things to end like that. I was forced, Jonathan. They threatened me. He raised a hand. Stop lying. Her lips trembled. I'm not lying. Please let me explain. He stood slowly, his tall frame casting a shadow across the floor. You planted those drugs. You let me rot in a cell for 5 years. You sold everything I worked for. And when I came out, you had married another man. A billionaire, wasn't he? You didn't even look back. Amanda covered her face and began to sob. Please, she cried, you don't understand. After you were arrested, the press destroyed me too. People called me the drug dealer's wife. I thought my life was over. Then Samuel came into my life. He promised to protect me, to help me start again. She looked up with bloodshot eyes. But he lied. He used me. And now, he's dead. Jonathan froze. Dead? She nodded weakly. A plane crash. It was on the news 3 weeks ago. After his death, everything collapsed. The banks came and seized our properties. They said he owed billions in loans. I had no idea. They took everything. His cars, his mansion, even the jewelry. I have nowhere to go. She knelt suddenly, clutching his hand. Please, Jonathan, you're the only one I have left. Her tears splashed against his skin, warm and real. Jonathan stared down at her. Once, he would have done anything to protect her. But now her tears only reminded him of the nights he spent staring at a prison wall, wondering why the woman he loved never came. He pulled his hand away. Do you know what it's like to sleep in the rain? He asked quietly. To beg for food? To have people walk past you as if you don't exist? Amanda sobbed harder. I deserve whatever punishment you give, but please don't send me away. Jonathan looked at her for a long, heavy moment. Then he spoke, his voice low. You'll stay, but not as my guest. She looked up, confused. What do you mean? He turned toward the window. You'll work here, as a janitor. You'll clean the floors, sweep the halls, and earn your meals with your hands. Maybe then you'll understand the life you pushed me into. Amanda gasped. Jonathan, please, I can't. You can, he interrupted firmly, and you will. Because that's the only way I can forgive you. Her body shook with silent sobs, but she nodded. Yes, she whispered, if that's what it takes. Jonathan didn't look back. The housekeeper will show you where to start. When she left the room, he sank slowly into his chair, pressing his palms to his face. The air around him felt heavy, like the weight of 1,000 memories. That evening, Williams found him sitting in the garden, staring into the distance. She's here, Williams said softly. You're past. Jonathan nodded slowly. Yes, and she's cleaning my floors. Williams sighed. Are you sure that's the right thing to do? Jonathan didn't answer for a while. Then he said quietly, It's not about revenge, Williams. It's about truth. For years I prayed to face her again, not to hurt her, but to see if she could ever feel what I felt. Williams sat beside him. And now? Jonathan looked up at the sky. Now? I don't even know how to feel. I should hate her. But I don't. I just feel tired. The wind rustled through the trees. The fountain trickled nearby. You've been given a second life, Williams said finally. Don't let bitterness ruin it. Let her see what she lost, but don't lose yourself trying to punish her. Jonathan turned to him, eyes wet but calm. Maybe forgiveness isn't about freeing her, he said softly. Maybe it's about freeing me. Williams nodded. Then free yourself, my friend. You deserve peace. Jonathan smiled faintly. Peace, he repeated, as if testing the word. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that peace was still far away. Because forgiveness was easy to say, until the person who broke you was sweeping your floors and you had to look at her every single day. And in the shadows of that mansion, Amanda wasn't done. She had seen the documents in Williams's study. She knew Jonathan now owned 30% of LamsTech, and she wasn't ready to let him live the life she once stole. Not yet. 2 weeks changed everything. By the second Monday, Jonathan wasn't the quiet man under the bridge anymore. He woke up before sunrise, prayed, ironed his shirt, polished his shoes, and rode with Williams to LamsTech's glass towers in Victoria Island. The car windows showed the city waking up, Okadas, street hawkers, school children in uniforms. Inside the Bentley, Jonathan sat tall, his shoulders square, his eyes steady. LamsTech's lobby had a silver logo that caught the light like water. Staff whispered when he walked through. Some smiled, a few stared. People had seen the Oshodi chess video on social media. It had spread across Lagos like wildfire. A homeless man, a wooden board, and a win no one saw coming. It made people argue in buses and in offices. Some called it luck, some called it grace. But everyone watched. That morning, Williams led him into a boardroom with a long table and a Lagos lagoon view. Screens glowed, files sat in neat stacks. Executives filled the chairs, CFO Kalu with hard eyes, legal director Fowler with a neat bun. Head of operations Bisi with sharp notes and a quicker mind. But one person made the room a little brighter. Jonathan, Williams said with a proud smile, meet Jessica. Head of strategy. She stood, tall and calm, with warm brown skin and curious eyes that held steady when they met his. Her handshake was firm, her voice was clear. Welcome to LamsTech, Mr. Adeyemi. I've read your brief. I also watched your game. A hint of a smile. Beautiful endgame. Heat rose to his face. Thank you, he said. Please, call me Jonathan. During the meeting, Jessica spoke like a captain steering a ship through fog. She laid out maps of new markets, showed risks, asked for truth, not flattery. When she asked Jonathan for his view on a stalled contract in Port Harcourt, he didn't pretend to know more than he did. I need the field reports, he said simply, and I want to talk to the engineers on site. The people who touch the work know where the cracks are. Jessica's eyes brightened. Agreed. CFO Kalu cleared his throat. With respect, this is highly unusual. A newcomer cannot step into core operations overnight. Williams didn't look away from Kalu. 30% of the company is not a newcomer, Mr. Kalu. He's a partner. Kalu's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. The meeting stretched into noon, then into afternoon. When it ended, Jessica walked with Jonathan to the elevator. You were honest, she said. We need that here. Jonathan smiled, small and real. Honest saved my life. The elevator doors slid open. As they stepped in, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. Strange. Someone just sent me the Oshodi clip again, with a caption, illegally obtained shares. Jonathan's smile faded. Who sent it? No name, a hidden number. She met his eyes. Be careful. Back at the mansion, a different story was playing. Amanda wore a blue apron and held a broom. She swept the front hall slowly, the bristles moving dust into a neat pile. Her face was pale. The cart rattled whenever she pushed it. Housekeepers passed her without eye contact. Security watched from the edges. At first, the work burned her pride like fire. Then it burned something else, her shame. She woke at dawn to wash floors. She carried water that made her arms ache. She learned the names of quiet things, polish, rag, bleach. When she sat in the staff kitchen, no one asked her about diamonds or private jets. They asked if she wanted tea. Sometimes, while wiping the study windows, she saw Jonathan down in the garden talking with Williams, or in the corner with files, or on the phone with Jessica, her voice light through the speaker, her laugh soft. Then Amanda's fingers would tremble against the glass. She had been queen once. She had chosen power over love. Now she scrubbed the floors of the man she broke. One night after everyone slept, Amanda crept back into the study. The room smelled like leather and paper and nights that never grew old. She moved to the desk where Williams and Jonathan often sat. A folder lay open, share register, LamsTech holdings. She stared at the lines until they blurred. 30% beside Jonathan's name, 30%. That should have been hers if she had waited, if she had believed, if she had not planted pain. A tear fell. She wiped it away with the back of her wrist. Then she took out her phone and snapped a photo. Another. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Unknown number. Do you want your life back? Amanda's breath caught. Who is this? Someone who can help you undo a mistake. Meet me tomorrow, 6 p.m., the back gate. Come alone. She stared at the screen. Fear rose in her chest, wild and cold. She typed, deleted, typed again, then locked the phone and slipped it into her apron pocket. The night felt too quiet. The window showed a black slice of lagoon sky. She left the study and didn't see the red light in the corner blinking softly. The small camera that watched the room after midnight. The next day at LamsTech, Jonathan stepped into a different kind of fire. He sat with engineers who wore dusty boots and spoke in short, tired sentences. He met a data team that had clever eyes and smiles that didn't last long. He asked questions no one had asked them in a long time. What is wasting your time? What is breaking your back? What's the small fix that would save a big loss? Answers poured out like rain after heat. By evening, he had a list of quick wins and a bigger list of stubborn problems that needed time. He wrote notes by hand. He marked 3 names to call again. He sent Jessica a message. I want a weekly room where only truth is allowed. Engineers, ops, finance, legal. No titles, only facts. We solve one thing a week until the list dies. Her reply came fast. Done. I'll book the room and bring the hard questions. As he slipped his phone back into his pocket, he caught his reflection in a glass wall. The suit fit, the shoulders held. But what surprised him most was the look in his eyes. Steady, awake. Sir, a receptionist called, half whispering as she ran over. There are men at the front desk. They say it's urgent. They want to see you and Mr. Williams. Who are they? He asked. She swallowed. Financial crime officials. The corridor seemed to tilt. He walked toward the elevator, heart beating hard. The lobby was crowded now. Security stood stiff. 2 men in dark suits waited with a woman who held a folder tight to her chest. Their faces were calm, the way oceans are calm just before a storm. Good evening, the lead officer said, not unkind. Mr. Williams, Mr. Adeyemi. Williams had just arrived. He moved to Jonathan's side, jaw set. What is this? The officer opened the folder and read, We have a petition and a court order to freeze and review certain transactions. Allegations claim that 30% of LamsTech shares were obtained through coercion and an illegal wager. There is also a claim that prohibited substances were found in a room connected to Mr. Adeyemi. The lobby gasped. The words stung like old fire. Jonathan's mouth went dry. That's a lie, he said softly. I have not touched that darkness since. We're not here to judge, the woman cut in. We're here to verify. Williams's voice was ice. Who filed the petition? The officer glanced at the paper. Anonymous submission, counselled by Kalu and partners. CFO Kalu stepped out from the crowd as if pulled by a string. His face was smooth as glass. We all love the company, sir, he said to Williams. We must protect it from confusion. Jessica came in at a run, eyes flashing. Sir, she said to Williams, the board is upstairs waiting to sign the Port Harcourt contract. If this order lands before the signatures, the deal dies. The officer closed the folder. We'll need immediate access to the registry, the share transfer logs, and Mr. Adeyemi's residence. A team is already en route. Jonathan's head snapped up. My residence? I live at Williams's estate. The officer nodded. Yes. The staff quarters and the study. A cold line of fear crawled up Jonathan's spine. He remembered the night he left a file open on the desk. He remembered the camera in the corner, its tiny red eye. He also remembered Amanda. Jessica stepped closer, her voice low and steady at his ear. Look at me, she said. We will fight this. Facts don't fear light. Williams faced the officer. We will comply. But you will not walk around my company like thieves in a market. You will follow the law, and you will respect my people. The officer's mouth tugged into the hint of a smile. That is our intention, sir. The security gates clicked open. The official from Financial Crime Team started forward. Jessica grabbed a folder off the counter and shoved it into Jonathan's hands. Go, she whispered. Boardroom. If we sign the Port Harcourt deal now, we keep 3,000 jobs alive. If we lose it, the story writes itself. He looked at Williams. Williams nodded once. Sign the work, he said. I will hold the storm. Jonathan ran for the elevator. The doors slid shut. The lift began to rise. The city poured gold over the lagoon beyond the glass. He pressed the folder tight to his chest and took a breath that felt like swallowing fire. On the 10th floor, the doors opened to a corridor of waiting faces. The boardroom stood at the end, doors wide, contract on the table, pens lined like soldiers. He stepped in and froze. Amanda was standing by the window, in a neat blue dress, without an apron, eyes swollen from tears, and beside her, holding a slim black briefcase, was CFO Kalu. Amanda's voice shook as she turned to him. Jonathan, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they would. Kalu opened the briefcase and slid out a paper stamped with a bold red seal. Court injunction, he said smoothly. Effective now. No contracts, no transfers, no signatures. The door behind Jonathan clicked. 2 officials of the Financial Crime L Commission stepped into the room. Mr. Adeyemi, one of them said, please come with us. The fluorescent light above the Financial Crime Commission's interrogation room buzzed faintly, flickering like an exhausted firefly. Jonathan sat at the metal table, wrists resting calmly in front of him, though his pulse raced beneath the skin. Across from him, 2 officers reviewed documents. Their expressions were flat, professional, faces that had seen guilt 100 times before and could smell fear from across a room. But Jonathan wasn't afraid anymore, not of men, not of prisons, not of the past. He had already lost everything once. The door opened. Williams entered, followed by Jessica, who looked like she hadn't slept. Her face was fierce, though, the kind of fierce that comes from loyalty, not anger. Gentlemen, Williams said coldly, you've detained the wrong man. The lead officer looked up. That's what everyone says, sir. Then let's let the evidence speak, Jessica said, setting down a folder so thick it landed with a thud. She opened it and slid out printed photos, grainy black and white stills from the mansion's security cameras. These were recorded 48 hours before your so-called anonymous petition, she said. You'll want to see the timestamp. The first image showed Amanda inside the study, taking photos of confidential documents after midnight. The second showed her receiving a phone call, then slipping something, small and round, under the desk drawer. The third image froze the officers in their seats. It showed her meeting with CFO Kalu at the back gate, handing him a brown envelope. Jessica folded her arms. Inside that envelope was a forged affidavit claiming Jonathan obtained shares through coercion. Kalu planned to send it to Financial Crime Commission under an anonymous tip, then manipulate the press into believing LamsTech was under criminal control. He wanted to buy out Williams's shares at half price once the scandal destroyed the company's stock value. The lead officer frowned and leaned closer to the images. Do you have physical evidence of this handover? Williams stepped forward and dropped a small recorder onto the table. This device was found in Amanda's cleaning cart. She planted it to spy on us, but forgot to delete the audio. It caught their entire conversation. Jessica pressed play. Kalu's smooth voice filled the room. Once the Financial Crime Commission shows up, Williams will panic. The media will run the story. Then we'll buy back control through the shell company. No one will trace it back. Amanda's voice trembled on the recording. But Jonathan, he's a good man. He doesn't deserve this. Deserve, Kalu's voice hissed. He took what should have been yours. Don't grow a conscience now. You'll get your cut when this is over. Silence followed. The officers exchanged glances. One of them turned off the recorder and nodded slowly. We'll verify this, but it looks compelling. Jessica exhaled. You should also know, she added, that the Financial Crime Commission order Kalu presented wasn't signed by the issuing judge. We've already confirmed it's fake. Williams folded his arms, his voice calm but firm. Gentlemen, you've wasted a day detaining an innocent man. I suggest you use the next one to arrest the right people. The officers stood. Mr. Adeyemi, you're free to go. Jonathan didn't move for a moment. He just sat there, the words sinking in like light into dark water. Then slowly he rose to his feet. Thank you, he said softly. Outside the building, the sun had already started to fall. The Lagos air was thick with the sound of horns and life. Jonathan stepped out first, the wind brushing against his face like forgiveness itself. Jessica walked beside him, her hand briefly brushing his arm. Welcome back, she said quietly. He smiled. Feels strange. I spent years fighting for freedom in a cell. Now I have it. And I almost lost it again because of the same woman. Jessica looked at him. Do you still hate her? He thought for a long moment before answering. No, he said finally. Hate is a prison too. The following morning, Amanda sat in the mansion's courtyard, surrounded by security guards. Her blue uniform was gone. She now wore plain clothes, her hair unkempt again. She looked smaller than before, like a person whose pride had been stripped away layer by layer. Jonathan walked toward her slowly. She couldn't look him in the eye. I never meant for it to go that far, she whispered. Kalu said he just wanted to clear the records. I didn't know he would. You didn't know, Jonathan repeated quietly. That's the same thing you said when you ruined my life 5 years ago. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I was angry. I was desperate. When I saw you living this life again, I thought, maybe it should have been me. I made a mistake. Jonathan sighed. Amanda, I forgave you long before you asked. I just never expected you'd hurt me again after I gave you a chance. She covered her face, sobbing. Please, just don't hand me over to the police. I'll leave Lagos. I'll disappear. Please, Jonathan. He looked at her quietly. There was no anger in his face now, only sadness. You'll face what you caused, he said softly, but not because I hate you. Because maybe this time the pain will teach you what love never did. He turned to the guards. Take her to the authorities, make sure she's treated fairly. Amanda broke down completely as they led her away. Her cries echoed down the hall, faint but unforgettable. Williams stood by the door, arms folded. You could have protected her, you know, he said quietly. No one would have questioned you. Jonathan nodded. And if I did, I'd become like her. I'd start thinking forgiveness means letting people walk through your life again. It doesn't. Forgiveness is setting yourself free and then closing the door behind you. Williams smiled faintly. You've grown wiser than half the board members I've ever had. Jonathan chuckled. Experience is the best university. And life, well, it doesn't offer scholarships. A week later, LamsTech's boardroom looked different. Kalu's chair was empty, his name already erased from the glass wall. Reporters outside the building were buzzing about the company's new deal with the Port Harcourt branch, signed and secured the day after the scandal broke. Williams stood at the head of the table, addressing his executives. Sometimes, he said, the storms life brings aren't meant to destroy us. They're meant to wash away the people who were never supposed to sail with us. Then he turned to Jonathan. And sometimes, he added, they bring us new captains. Applause filled the room, cameras clicked, and in that moment, Jonathan realized he was no longer the man beneath the bridge. After the meeting, Jessica met him in the corridor. You did it, she said softly. He smiled. No, he replied. We did. She laughed lightly. Still humble after all that? He shrugged. Humility is just memory that refuses to forget where it came from. They stood there for a moment, quiet but connected, two people who had both fought storms and found purpose in the wreckage. That night, Williams hosted a small dinner at the mansion. Only a handful of close friends attended. The fountain glowed under soft lights and laughter floated through the air. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt like life was smiling back at him. When it was his turn to speak, he raised a glass. To second chances, he said. To the strange ways God rewrites our stories. I lost everything once. My name, my wife, my dignity. But I gained something stronger. Wisdom, forgiveness, and family that isn't bound by blood, but by truth. Williams clinked his glass against Jonathan's. To truth, he echoed. Jessica smiled across the table. And to the greatest chess move of all, she said playfully, turning defeat into destiny. They laughed. The music played softly in the background. As the night wore on, Jonathan walked out into the garden. The air was cool. Above him, the stars shimmered faintly, scattered like pieces on a cosmic chessboard. He closed his eyes and whispered a quiet prayer. "Thank you," he said. From a man sleeping under Oshodi Bridge, to a partner in one of Africa's biggest companies, to a man who finally found peace. He smiled faintly, hearing Williams's voice from behind him. "You won more than my company, Jonathan." Jonathan turned, his expression calm. "No," he said softly, "I won my life back." 2 months had passed since the scandal ended. The sun over Lagos seemed softer now, as if the city itself was catching its breath. LamsTech was thriving again, the media storm had died down, and Jonathan had finally found rhythm in his new life. But beneath the calm, something gentle was growing, something he hadn't felt in years. Every morning, Jessica stopped by his office with 2 cups of coffee, one black, one sweet. They joked, they planned, they argued about board strategies that always ended in laughter. It started as teamwork, then friendship, and quietly it became something neither could name, but both could feel. One evening, as the city lights flickered across the lagoon, Jonathan stood by the window of his office, staring at the skyline. Jessica walked in, still in her navy blue suit, holding a file. "You're still here," she said softly. "You promised you'd rest after the meeting." He smiled faintly. "Old habits. I spent too long fighting for the life I have now. It's hard to stop fighting." Jessica stepped closer. "You don't have to fight anymore. You won." Jonathan looked at her then, really looked. The way the warm light touched her face, the calm strength in her eyes, it felt like peace wearing a human face. "I didn't win alone," he said quietly. "You stood beside me when everyone else ran. You believed when I couldn't even believe in myself." She smiled shyly. "That's what friends do." He hesitated. "And what if I don't want to be just your friend anymore?" Jessica froze. Her heart skipped. The air between them thickened, full of words she didn't expect to hear but had secretly wished for. Jonathan took a deep breath and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. "I had this made last week," he said. "Not because I'm rich now, but because I'm finally free. And I want to build the rest of that freedom with you." Jessica's eyes widened, her lips trembling as he knelt slowly. The sight of him kneeling wasn't just romantic, it was humbling. This was a man who had once knelt in despair, now kneeling in love. "Jessica," he said, voice soft but steady, "you walked into my chaos and made it home. You turned my fear into faith. Will you marry me and build a future where both of us never have to fight alone again?" Her hand flew to her mouth, tears filled her eyes. For a long moment she couldn't speak. Then she laughed through her tears, nodding. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Jonathan, I will." He slid the ring onto her finger, a simple silver band with a small diamond that sparkled like morning dew. She pulled him up and hugged him tightly, their laughter mixing with tears. Williams, who had been standing quietly at the door for the last few minutes, cleared his throat. "I see my 2 best executives finally solved the company's biggest problem: loneliness." They turned, startled. Jessica laughed. Jonathan grinned sheepishly. Williams smiled warmly, eyes moist. "I've watched both of you rebuild not just a company, but yourselves. And I can't think of 2 people who deserve happiness more than you." Jessica wiped her tears. "You knew he'd do this, didn't you?" Williams chuckled. "Let's just say the moment he started showing up to work early and leaving late, without complaints, I knew something deeper than business was happening." He stepped forward, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "Don't forget what brought you here. Not luck, not money, faith. Keep that, and you'll never lose." That night, as they stepped outside together, Lagos shimmered below them. Cars like fireflies, the lagoon reflecting the moonlight. Jessica leaned her head on his shoulder. "It's strange," she whispered. "The man who once lost everything now has everything money can't buy." Jonathan smiled softly. "That's the thing about grace. It always finds you when you're not looking." And as the night breeze wrapped around them, the future stretched wide and open, waiting for their next move. Two players who had finally learned that the most beautiful victory is love itself. The morning sun rose gently over Victoria Island, pouring gold light across the lawns of the LamsTech Events Hall. White flowers lined the path from the marble entrance to a grand open canopy. Soft music floated through the air, blending with the scent of roses and fresh linen. Guests arrived in sleek cars, their colorful attire shimmering like rainbows under the Lagos sky. At the far end of the aisle stood Jonathan, dressed in an elegant black tuxedo that fit him like destiny itself. His once rough hands, now steady and strong, held a single white rose. His smile carried both peace and memory, a quiet victory born from pain. Across the crowd, William sat in the front row, wearing a navy blue agbada embroidered with gold threads. His eyes glistened as he watched Jonathan stand where few men ever returned from, the edge of ruin to the altar of redemption. He wiped a tear, though he tried to hide it behind his laughter. Beside him, a familiar group of company executives whispered and smiled. "That's him," one said softly, "the man who changed LamsTech's story." When the music shifted, all turned. Jessica stepped into view. She was radiant in a flowing white gown that shimmered like morning dew. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, small pearls woven through. In her hands, she carried a bouquet of lilies, the same kind that filled the hospital room where her late mother once told her, "Marry a man whose scars teach you something beautiful." As she walked down the aisle, every step carried the weight of everything they had both survived: betrayal, loss, fear, and faith. Her eyes never left Jonathan's. When she reached him, he whispered, "You came." Jessica smiled. "You waited." The priest began. "Today we gather not to celebrate perfection, but redemption, the kind of love that rises after the fire." Laughter rippled through the guests when the priest added, "And may this marriage have fewer checkmates than their first meeting." Jonathan chuckled softly, glancing at Williams, who laughed the loudest. As vows were exchanged, the world seemed to pause. "I once thought life was a game I had lost," Jonathan said, voice trembling, "but you, Jessica, reminded me that even fallen kings can rise again. You loved me when the world called me broken. You gave me a reason to believe again." Jessica's eyes shone. "You taught me that faith isn't about never falling. It's about who holds your hand when you do. You held mine, even when your own hands were still shaking." When the priest finally said, "You may kiss the bride," applause burst through the air. Cameras flashed. Somewhere, a choir began to sing softly. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. William stood with tears rolling freely down his cheeks. He clapped slowly, then faster, until the crowd joined him. He wasn't crying for sadness, he was crying because, for the first time in years, he saw what true victory looked like. Not profit, not power, but peace. After the ceremony, at the reception hall overlooking the lagoon, laughter filled the air. The chandeliers sparkled like a sky of captured stars. Williams raised his glass during the toast. "To Jonathan and Jessica," he began, voice thick with emotion. "Two people who remind us that no matter how far we fall, kindness can still find us. I lost a game under a bridge, but I gained a brother, a friend, and a reason to believe that grace still exists." The guests cheered. Some cried. Jonathan and Jessica held hands tightly. When the night grew quiet, Jonathan stepped outside for a moment, staring at the lagoon lights reflecting off the water. Williams joined him. They stood side by side, saying nothing at first. "You know," Williams said softly, "I never told you this, but the day you beat me, I was thinking of giving up everything. My company, my life. I thought I'd lost myself in all the noise. But you reminded me what it means to be human again." Jonathan smiled gently. "Then I guess we both won that day." Williams chuckled, eyes still damp. "I lost a company that morning," he said, placing a hand on Jonathan's shoulder, "but I gained a family." Inside, Jessica called out with laughter, "My husband! Come dance with me before William steals the spotlight again. Jonathan turned toward her, smiling wide. Coming, my queen. He took her hand as the music swelled and the guests gathered around. They danced under a shower of golden confetti, laughter echoing through the night. And as Williams watched, still wiping tears from his eyes, he whispered to himself, This is what victory looks like. Under the Lagos stars, two souls who had once been broken found there forever. Proof that even in a world full of losses, love remains the most beautiful checkmate of all. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.